Question: what is Goku's most famous line?
I am the hope of the universe.
No. That is an English dub only thing. Goku never actually said that. The truth is that Goku has a lot of famous lines. However, if you were to ask somebody in Japan what Goku's most famous line is, I think there's a really good chance that almost everybody would answer this.
What? Goku?
There's a whole lot to say about this very simple line, and that is the topic of today's video. So join me as I dig into ossu, Ora Goku in this edition of Dragon Ball Dictionary. Hey guys, it's Tony. Just wanted to say really quickly, thank you so much to everybody who has subscribed lately. We're finally over 2,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. I am so glad that you guys are enjoying the content. I have a lot more ideas for videos, so if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do that because there's a lot more coming. So let's get into it. Ossu, Ora Goku. What does that mean? So full disclosure, I haven't watched all of Dragon Ball in the English dub, so maybe there's an exception here or there, but from what I can tell, it seems that ossu, Ora Goku is translated as,
Hey, it's me, Goku.
This is a good translation. There's nothing wrong with it. However, as often is the case, there is some information in the original Japanese that didn't make it into the English translation. And that's not criticism, by the way. That's just what happens when you adapt something into a new language, especially when you're talking about the dubs, because you have to match the lip movements and all that. Hopefully you understand that, but if you don't, you're probably leaving me comments already saying, how dare you insult the Funimation dub? I haven't. So if you're leaving me comments, thanks for the engagement. Now, I am going to talk about who actually created this line because it wasn't Akira Toriyama. But before I get to that, I want to talk about what information is being left out of this in the English translation. So in order to do that, we got to break this down into its components. There's 3 parts to this sentence. Ossu, Ora Goku. That's it. All this means is, hey, I'm Goku. It's not complicated in any way. But each of these components, especially the first 2, the last one is just Goku's name, so there isn't all that much to say about that. But the first 2 have a lot of meaning, a lot of interesting things that we can say about them. First up, there's ossu.
Ossu.
This is an informal greeting that is often associated with martial arts and the military and sports, basically very physical settings. So you're likely to hear people in a judo dojo or a karate dojo use this, or maybe kids in a high school baseball team, they would probably say this to each other, or maybe in the military. However, it is also used outside of these settings, a lot of times by younger males. However, some women do also use this greeting. As for the origins of ossu, that's a very interesting topic, and there's multiple theories about where this word came from. So I'm not going to go into all of them because we'd be here for an hour. I'm just going to focus on the one that seems to be the most widely accepted. Basically, it's thought that os comes from ohayo gozaimasu. Ohayo gozaimasu just means good morning. So everything between the first o of ohayo gozaimasu and the last su got deleted, and you ended up with os. That's the theory. But there's another layer to this because os has kanji or Chinese characters. The Japanese writing system is infamous for being complicated, so don't worry, I'm not going to get into all that. I'm going to finish this explanation and then we'll get back into analyzing Goku. We're coming back to the Dragon Ball stuff, just hang in there. So assuming that Ohayo gozaimasu got shortened into ossu, what happened after that is that somebody decided to give this word, this original word contracted from Ohayo gozaimasu, its own kanji, its own Chinese characters. So we get 2 kanji that were assigned to this word after the fact. The first means something like push, and then the second one, interestingly, is actually the first kanji for the word ninja, like as in ninjas with the masks and all that. Also, shinobi, same kanji. So this means to endure. Push and endure. I know that doesn't sound like all that much, but the intended meaning here is to push down one's ego, push down one's emotions, and endure. This meaning and this philosophy works great with Goku, right? Because he's all about enduring and training, and he's not about ego. So whether he's doing it consciously or not, he is kind of pushing down that ego, pushing down those emotions, and just focusing on the training. Kind of the opposite of Vegeta. He definitely does have an ego, right? He's much more prideful. So maybe Ossu doesn't work so well with Vegeta, but it works great with Goku. And even if this whole origin story with Ossu originally coming from Ohayo gozaimasu isn't actually the case, it doesn't really matter because Ossu is still very much associated with martial artists. So this is a very good greeting for Goku. Okay, so next up we have Ora. So this is a first person pronoun. All it means is I. However, in Japanese, there's a lot of different first person pronouns, and each of them have their own connotations and nuances. Put simply, Ora is one of the components that gives Goku his country bumpkin vibe. This is the pronoun that he uses, and this pronoun comes from the Tohoku dialect. In Japanese media, the Tohoku dialect is basically used as shorthand for a character that just came from the countryside.
オラ、牛魔王の娘の父だよ。
It's used less like that these days, but you still see it in Japanese media, especially older media. Now, Chi-Chi and a few other just random, not important, unnamed characters do use Ora as well. But as one Japanese article that I came across puts it, Goku is probably the most famous character in all of Japanese media to use the first-person pronoun Ora. And given how popular Dragon Ball is around the world, I'd have to say that the chances of that being true are very high. As for the last part, it's just Goku's name. There's not much more to say about that. So hopefully now you see that even though this is a very short sentence, there's a lot of meaning packed into it, and a lot of that meaning gets completely lost in the English version. However, there's a lot more to say about this line, and things get a lot more interesting from here. Why? Because this line, despite the fact that it is arguably the most famous line in all of Dragon Ball and one of the most famous lines in all of anime, the fact is that this line never appears in the original Dragon Ball manga, and I'm including the Dragon Ball Z portion in this as well. That's because it wasn't Akira Toriyama that wrote this line. The creator of this line is none other than Masako Nozawa, the Japanese voice actor of Goku.
おごて、なんで学校も終わったんか？今日は日曜日だよ、お父さん。
She actually talked about this in a 2018 appearance on the Japanese TV show Downtown Now. This is what she said. I was standing in front of the mic, and then as a joke, I said, Os, ora Goku. The staff behind me heard me say that, and then they said, that's good. After this, Nozawa goes on to explain that people just thought that it was Toei who created this line. And she doesn't say that Toei tried to take credit for writing the line. Maybe they never actually said that, but people just assumed that it was Toei because the first time this line appears is in the anime. Okay, so Masako Nozawa created the line. But when does Goku say this line? Well, he says it a lot. And he says it in the next episode previews. Although there's some exceptions, for the most part, you can hear Goku saying Os, ora Goku at the beginning of the next episode previews in the original Dragon Ball anime, in Dragon Ball Z, and even in Dragon Ball GT. The first time Goku says this is at the end of episode 2 in the next episode preview for episode 3 of the original Dragon Ball anime.
オラ、悟空。
In other words, from 1986 all the way till the end of Dragon Ball GT in 1997, most weeks people who tuned in to watch Dragon Ball got to hear Masako Nozawa say, Os, ora Goku. So it's no wonder that this ended up getting burned into the minds of so many people in Japan and ended up becoming Goku's most famous catchphrase. But what about modern Dragon Ball? Does Goku say this line in Dragon Ball Super and in the movies and all that? Well, from what I can determine, yes, but it's a little more complicated than just yes. So, first of all, Goku does say Os, ora Goku in the next episode previews of Dragon Ball Super. So that tradition was kept up in Dragon Ball Super. However, does he say it in universe? The answer to that is no. There's two moments where he comes very, very close. The first is in the Battle of Gods movie. There's a moment when Goku is on King Kai's planet and he meets Beerus for the first time. Goku tries to say Os, ora Goku, but he gets cut off by King Kai before he can finish. He gets cut off at the go part of Goku, so he never actually says it. This has got to be a little inside joke for hardcore Dragon Ball fans who know that Goku has never said this within the universe of Dragon Ball. He's only said it in the next episode preview, so I can only imagine that the hardcore Dragon Ball fans were really enjoying that joke. And then there's another moment that unfortunately I wasn't able to confirm myself because I don't have access to the Dragon Ball Super manga. According to a Japanese website that I came across, the first time that Goku meets the Grand Priest, the Daishinkan, in the manga of Dragon Ball Super, okay, this is only in the manga, Goku actually says os and Ora Goku da. So it seems like there's a pause in between os and Ora Goku da. And also, Ora Goku da. It's not Ora Goku, it's Ora Goku da. Da is the informal version of the Japanese verb for to be. And you don't need to know anything more than that. The point is that this goes at the end of a sentence. And well, in this situation, he said Ora Goku da. He didn't say Ora Goku. He added the da at the end. So this does not count. They do not want to let Goku say os Ora Goku in universe. But what about Daima? No, he did not say it in Daima either. And the next episode previews for Daima don't even have narration. There's no voice, it's just music. So Goku didn't even say os Ora Goku in the next episode previews.
Os Ora Goku! 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 Os
When you ask somebody in Japan to do an impression of Goku, almost always they're going to say os Ora Goku. That is the default thing to say if you're trying to do an impression of Goku.
はいはい。何かな？
ちょっとこれこんなしてからや。
おす、オラゴク。
Why? Well, because of the reasons that I just laid out. First of all, it's burned into people's minds. Second, there's a lot of meaning in this phrase. Os, ora. These are not words that are used by Bulma or Piccolo or Krillin or just about every single other character in Dragon Ball. When you hear these words, you think of Goku. These have become very much associated with Goku, not just because Goku says them all the time, but because they fit with his personality. Contrast this with the English. Hey, it's me, Goku. I'm not out to criticize this translation because, again, it's a good translation, but it is very generic. Bulma could say, hey, it's me, Bulma, and it wouldn't sound particularly strange. Krillin could say this, Master Roshi could say this, and it wouldn't sound all that strange because, again, it's very generic. These are normal words that most characters could say, and it would not sound strange. Os, ora, these are words that only Goku would say, right? So it works really well from that perspective. And then on top of that, you have Masako Nozawa's vocal performance, right? She uses a very distinctive voice for Goku. Contrast that with the English performance, and I'm not criticizing it, but Goku's voice in English does sound much more like a normal guy, right? So there's not much to impersonate there, right? It's, hey, it's me, Goku. It's a normal guy. So it's not the best line for a Goku impersonation. Whereas in Japanese, this is the go-to line. So if you ever want to work on your Japanese Goku impersonation, practice this line.
Os, ora Goku. Os, ora Gohan.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe because I've got a lot more videos coming. And if you enjoyed this one, I think you might enjoy my videos in the Dragon Ball Dictionary series. So check out that playlist and I'll see you in the next one.